Today, we get to talk about the nervous system, and particularly grounding your nervous system so that you feel more at peace, more clear, more focused in your life, so that you can walk through life not feeling that unsettled, unpleasant feeling that goes along with anxiety and that may build and build and maybe show up in more extreme ways. Today we get to really focus in on this conversation. It's one that I tend to dance around a lot, but as we move into moving through the summer at this point, I just keep coming back to this space based on my own experience of finally finding that grounding, finally finding that peace and that flow where I can walk through life. And I come to you today because it's a new experience for me, one that I've spent years really now trying to figure out, trying to work through years of deeply crippling anxiety that was building, and finally broke into states of panic where I completely, entirely lost control of my nervous system. And it's a path that brought a lot of grief, a lot of suffering, required that I step away from a lot of the things in my life that truly light me up. Rock climbing, climbing up technical peaks, those being two big examples. And as we're walking through summer here, at least in my part of the world, entering into this season, coming out of a deep place of intentional healing, a space that, and after battling with myself and my nervous system for so long, I finally have let go into and really spent the time and attention needed to work with my nervous system in a way that I could emerge. And coming to you from this emergent space, emerging into this mountain season where I, for the first time in years, am able to show up and to allow a mountain to catch my eye and to show up and to take grounded steps all the way along the path. And and at this point, starting to dive into a little bit more specifically by what I mean. What does it mean to be grounded? What does it mean to be grounded? As I say that, it's my practice that I teach, and I find my body naturally feeling my feet on the floor, naturally going to this deeper space. In contrast to the way I lived my life for so long, just fully up in my head being this space that so much of us in our modern world live. We've put the human mind on a pedestal and we've disconnected it from the rest of ourselves, from our bodies. And it's up here that we experience the world, and it's up here that we try to solve problems. So when I found myself facing this set of problems, I was building, and doing all I could to work with these problems in the way that I knew from my head. I found that underlying anxiety kept building and building and building and building. And I found that it almost started building faster as I started fighting more and more with myself to solve this problem. Trying all these different solutions, mindfulness meditation, doing all these things that people told me could help, but doing so always up in my head, always in the state of being in disconnection from my body, living life based on this belief that is mind over matter, that is, if only I think hard enough and work hard enough and put enough intention and focus from my mind, I can make my body do what I want it to do, which is sometimes true. But I found for myself, and many of those I've gotten to work with now, that the path out of this space that so many of us find ourselves in, a path of crippling anxiety, of days of depression, right? One being a hyperactive nervous system, the other being a kind of suppressed nervous system. That's not a perfect way to explain it, but it is a simple, tangible way to think about it. And all these other things that manifest, again, full-blown panic attacks for myself, up climbing on routes that at one point were so easy. They were supposed to be easy routes, warm-up routes, routes where I was supposed to be able to so easily apply the mind over matter framework that I had learned, only to show up and find that my nervous system had had enough, that it was done being overrun by my mind. And it was going to speak up loudly now because it needed to. It needed to get me on board with my reality. Just taking a breath there. Taking a breath there. I find my nervous system now building and building and building and building. And it happens here. You're getting to watch it as we're talking. And finding an exhale for a little moment to discharge, a little moment to ground back in, feeling your feet on the floor. A moment to check in with yourself. Is there anything coming up for you? Do you feel your own nervous system charging up a little bit? I found that sometimes when we enter into these spaces that are just full of words and information, I've found that sometimes that can make things so much worse. So maybe that's happening for you, maybe it's not. Moving into a space here. Where do we want to go? I'm getting ready to talk about this experience I had this past weekend, and I feel called to share some words about it. Showing up in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado this year, in a space where I've finally allowed myself to be called home. That's where I'm so alive, is in the mountains. A space that this past year I found to be incredibly grounding. Grounding in a way, literally feet on dirt, feet on solid rock. So when we talk about grounding, if it helps to think about, or much better, go put your feet on dirt, on solid rock, and feel into it. Feel into that connection with the dirt, with the solid rock. So, in the time when my anxiety got out of control and the panic attacks had started, I found that I had to take myself away from less grounded spaces. For example, a cliff wall, right? Rock climbing was not grounding. Finding my way really through trail running or just being outside hiking around, putting my feet on the floor, on the ground, on the actual earth, over and over and over and over again, as I was moving my body through space, became the most profound, most healing space I personally could find myself in. So let's talk a little bit about why that worked for me and a little bit more about what happened. So finding my way into these spaces where I could have my feet physically on the dirt, physically on solid rock as I was moving through space. So let's talk about that movement piece, because when it comes to our nervous systems, what I see out there oftentimes is remedies to help us relax our nervous systems, is meditation, is coming into stillness, bringing our attention inward, and telling ourselves to relax. And what I've seen with so many different people now, and what I experience with myself, is how activating that was. I wanted anything but to be in stillness, completely taking in my own experience. That was something that was not helpful. So, when it comes to working with the nervous system, it's so important to meet it where it's at. So, being in this kind of hyper aroused state constantly, what I found I needed was to be in motion, but to be in motion in a grounded way. I also see people who find themselves in this nervous system state who have to keep moving, but are moving with such intensity that they're also not contributing to any sort of healing. Yes, it may be temporarily relieving to go for an intense run every day after work, and you may feel better afterwards. But oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, what we end up seeing is that it's really only a Band-Aid, and it's a Band-Aid that allows the problems that are underneath to keep festering, to keep growing. So, what happened for me with trail running was that I could meet myself where my nervous system was at. I needed to be moving. At the same time, I could be so grounded and I could get so in tune with my body that I was able to listen. I was able to listen. And this is really the key piece. Being able to listen to our nervous systems. So, yes, for the right individual at the right time, seated in meditation, closing your eyes, being in stillness, turning inward. It's a practice of mine these days, and I feel an immediate as I settle into a space where I can listen within. It took a little while to get there. It took a lot of miles, a lot and a lot of miles. If you've heard me talk about my journey to running a 100-miler, this was all part of it. It took a lot of time, a lot of steps, moving in a way, meeting my nervous system where it was at to be able to meet it where it was at, to be able to hear, to listen in, and allow things to come up, allow things to move. And that's really what this nervous system healing process is, right? And going a little deeper, we're not bringing deep traumas into this conversation, but just mentioning that it's appropriate to bring that into this space, that's what I've understood to really be the healing process, right? Being in a space where we can meet ourselves, to allow things to come up, to move through us as we're grounded. As we're grounded, because what is not helpful is things coming up that carry us away, that take us away, or that shut us down. And that's what often happens in these spaces is we're told, again, okay, quiet down, go inward, and we find that we can't meet these things. We take ourselves out, right? We take ourselves out of the experience because it's too much. Or if we don't take ourselves out of the experience, sometimes we're taken away by the experience. There's this middle space where we can be grounded. We can be grounded. We can allow things to move and we can meet what's moving. We can meet what's moving in a way that we allow it to flow through. So just that, if that's what you're here for, is a way to help you discharge. Maybe you've been dealing with something that you would put in the experience of trauma, or maybe you know the word, your nervous system, that concept is more resonant with you. They're different, but certainly well overlapped. So just noting that. Going back to the mountains, to this space I've found myself in. So, a year goes by. I'm not really rock climbing because it's too ungrounded, doesn't feel safe. I keep getting sent into panic attacks. Finding myself on the trails, being in this space where I'm grounded, I'm moving, I'm letting things move through me. And from there, taking a big break. I've talked a lot about that too, how after running 100 miles last year and putting a lot of stress on my body, because being out on the trails, moving around all the time takes its toll on our physical bodies. Stepping into a space of, okay, now it's time. Now it's time to come into stillness. Now it's time for those meditations where I can be in stillness, close my eyes, and be with what is present here and now. And allowing whatever healing needed to continue to unfold. And letting that bring me into the space that I am in now. Now being a space where I'm finding myself back in the mountains in Colorado, alone, facing mountains, showing up on them, and realizing that all those experiences that I've been feeling the last few years, the panic, the breath being taken away from me, the sort of wave of fog that would come over my head, the physical shaking, the strong emotion being a very powerful part of that experience, is gone. It's gone. And that's not to say it's gone completely or forever, but what it is to say that we move through life and we spend the time and attention and energy that we can towards healing, and we show up in the spaces that we want to be, and we go back to some more focused healing, and we show up in the spaces that we want to be, and we continue to take steps through life in this way. And then the day happens that you show up in the environment you want to be in, and you have the experience you want to have. For me, it was a grounded nervous system where I could take a trip up a mountain in a snowstorm, literally no ability to see where I was going, being a little bit unsure about the possibility that the weather could get worse. There's all these different possible, very legitimate threats. Being in that space where I could stay grounded, make rational decisions, be able to make those important decisions. Is the weather actually dangerous? Or am I just in a fun winter wonderland where, yes, I need to pay attention, but turns out it's actually going to be a magical day? Which is what got to unfold as I took step by step by step, 7 miles up, thousands of feet up through the trees, up above tree line, up and up and up, each step of the way until I got to the ridge line. Taking steps across this ridge line, being partway across and realizing this is really scary. This is really, the mountain's just dropping away and there is snow and ice, and knowing that I'm completely okay, knowing that I've got this, knowing that I can keep my feet on the ground. Knowing that I can keep my feet on the ground and the ground is there to support me and it's gonna hold me and I'm not gonna fall. And everything is going to continue to unfold in such a joy-filled, light-filled, fulfilling day. Whew, we went there today. We went there today. Curious stuff. It's an attitude I try to hold as we're dealing with some of the darker aspects of the human experience, and always holding space for the lighter aspects of the human experience, holding this attitude of curiosity. Wow, being a human being, doing my best to fully live the human experience. It's quite the journey. Quite the journey, one that never goes directly in the direction we think it's going to go, because our heads don't actually rule reality, do they? They certainly get to play a role, but they don't rule reality, do they? So ever more learning to live this fully embodied experience, this fully embodied experience in life as we move through life. Creating some space here to drop into your body again. Maybe feeling your feet on the floor, your seat in your chair. A moment to take your own temperature. What's alive for you? Moment to bring in the offerings that I have to support you more deeply in these spaces. The We Are the Forest membership is popping right now. I'm having so much fun recording practices for that space, a lot of guided meditations, a lot of creative meditations as we have some fun, as we explore all these things I'm talking about. My online yoga membership, if yoga is a more approachable space for you, it's a space where we can get out of our heads, be embodied, move and breathe as we ground, teach very grounding practices. Lastly, if you want one-on-one support, I do have slots open for one-on-one coaching. I recommend reaching out to me directly, katie@upwardslopes.com, if you have any interest there and just want to chat, see if I'm a good fit to help support you. As always, make sure you have hit the like button. Make sure you're subscribed. It really helps to build up this space here. And with that, we're going to close for today. And I look forward to seeing you in whatever the next space is that we find ourselves in.